What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Pro vs. Pro. News exploded this morning of the merger between LIV Golf, Deeper World Tour, and of course the PGA Tour. So we've got kind of just a show here where we're going to react to it. We're going to kind of talk through what's going on. I'm sure you guys all have questions about it. We've got some answers, but honestly, we also have plenty of questions still about it. Justin, what was your first reaction?
I mean, I knew it was coming 2 years ago. Monahan obviously has to go. Like, we've all talked about this. I just want to know what you think. Imagine being Zalatoris, young, offered $125 million reportedly to go to LIV, and you say, no, I want to live for legacy. And the guy that fed you all this bullshit says, all right, I'll take the money. Sorry, I'd cost you all that money, but I'm just going to take it.
Anybody who knows you knows that you have gripes with three organizations above all else: the USGA and the NCAA and the PGA Tour. Dude, you look so damn smart on this one.
I'm telling you, it's unbelievable, the situation, the reaction. My phone, when it came out, I'm going to say that I probably got 50 text messages of different people being like, how did you know? How did you know? And I was like, they're the greediest organization ever. Mm-hmm. And then what's gone by the wayside is they started a for-profit LLC. Imagine that. They're like, oh, let's start a for-profit LLC. So we actually have to pay taxes and we don't find money in the corner.
So not exactly. It's not. It's like an additional. We shouldn't get too like deep into the business and legal side of things. Neither of us are experts there. We're here to talk about golf, but I will say it is pretty clear that one of the reasons why they did this is because all of the litigation was maybe heading towards them losing their status as a nonprofit tax-exempt organization. They are still a nonprofit tax-exempt organization under this. There's like a different for-profit LLC being
right, but I mean, they're going to operate under the for-profit. I mean, owning the small business that I own and all the stuff that we go through, they're basically just getting called out for tax fraud without getting called out. And I think that the PGA Tour got to a point where they knew they were going to lose all of their lawsuits, and they're like, but now, honest question, how many players are going to sue the tour?
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where I think we have way more questions than answers at this point, because that certainly seems like it's a possibility. I have no idea what the outcomes of those lawsuits would be or what, but to your point about Zalatoris, I think he's one example for sure where it's just so abundantly clear that they are screwing him unless they do something above and beyond to kind of rectify that situation. But Rick Gaiman posted this morning that the initial kind of reaction was that tour players kind of hate this. Wesley Bryan tweeted directly that he feels betrayed by this. So I think there are so many layers to this, but I think the first one is if you were the PGA Tour and you were making this decision, wouldn't you have gone about this in a very different way than just announcing it on Twitter and letting your players find out this way?
Well, so this is the real deal. They had the whole golf world by the nuts. Mm-hmm. They could have done whatever they wanted if they would have been honest and transparent. Yeah. And they've never done that. Since the development of Canada, Latin America, China, that was 2012 or 2013, they acted like they had great intentions while in reality it was a money grab, right? So they had a chance, and greed obviously is going to be your loser in the whole deal. And it shows today because they got scared and they're like, well, now I can make money because I'm scared, so I might as well cash out while I can before we go completely, if all the lawsuits go through and we lose all those, then we have nothing, and then what do we do? So this is kind of like our buyout, so to speak.
As professional golfers, you and I have seen a unique side of this because we've experienced firsthand that greed where man, the cost of qualifying school is outrageous and it's going up and up and up. I think it might be $5,500 now between pre-qualifying and then the final 3 stages. It's absurd. And that's after, by the way, like they finally just found all of this money to pay Corn Ferry guys X amount every single year, to pay guys for missed cuts when they Monday qualify into a Corn Ferry or PGA Tour event. They found all this money for these designated events and things of that nature, all because of LIV. So yeah, I like the other aspect of it too is, the mini tours, there used to be so much more money involved. And then PGA Tour Canada and Latin and, guys on those tours, even if they're playing extremely well, they're struggling to break even. It's all the PGA Tour. Like they could change that in a heartbeat if they wanted to.
And I know you were with the MLB, FTN MLB stuff, which is pretty good, by the way. I had a nice, I'm not an MLB guy, but I used some of the advice the other day and had a nice hit. But they did an interview with Ogilvy, and I don't know if you've seen the reports of this, but he's like, yeah, Monahan got called out as being basically a piece of shit without saying that directly. And he took all questions and kept answering all the questions that were asked, but they were all the same generic answers, is the way that I took it from Ogilvy. And it's weird that we're talking about Jeff Ogilvy because I didn't even know, how is he even there, right? I mean, is he not on the senior tour, or where's he at? But at least somebody was there to give honest answers and talk about it, because nobody knows the repercussions of what they say. Nobody knows what's going forward. Now, that being said, like 10 years ago, I was like, man, how great would it be if Philadelphia, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Atlanta all had a golf team, and you had 5 players, and then you can do a relegation and delegation like we talked about all the way down the system of having team golf and have drafts and stuff. Like I hope that's the direction this is going. I mean, I saw Nike is about to buy Brooks Koepka's team for $2 billion. Yeah. Like
that was maybe the first hint of this, by the way, because like they weren't paying that money for Koepka's LIV team if it was just going to be LIV on its own. So
yeah,
certainly maybe the first hint that we probably could have been a little bit more on top of when it happened instead of just saying, well, that makes no sense. But yeah, I mean, I personally, I don't know how I feel about the team golf concept yet. Like I need to start thinking about that. It's a tough one. It's so foreign. There's a almost a famous now video of LeBron speaking to, I think it was Bronny and Bronny's AAU team or something, and talking about like how basketball is such a team sport. And he says like, hey, if you don't want to have teammates to count on, to have their back and for them to have your back, go play tennis, go play golf. And so all of a sudden, like, is that going to change? Can golf not be considered the individual sport anymore? Who the hell knows? But certainly the whole golf world has been shaken up today.
But I think you're going to relegate and delegate players, not teams, right? So that's where it still has such an individual concept to it that I think that it still could work, right? So, like, I'm a big fan. I think if they have an opportunity to do it right, which obviously Monahan can't do because he hasn't done anything right. But if they get the right person talking about this, and with all the funds that are going to come into this from Saudi and stuff, I really believe that we could have a great, great thing happening for the game of golf. I mean, they're talking about doing this all the way down to like the high school level and the college level, and creating these teams and growing these kids. And I don't know the answer. I hate that I'm going to miss out, but it might be great for our kids. You know, my kids might benefit from this if they ever decide to play. I think it's awesome. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know again in 6 months what I think. Yeah. I don't think they even know what they're doing.
I think that's a really good point. And certainly there are a lot of different ways it can go. There's, no matter what they choose, there's going to be a lot of pushback one way or another. So we'll see. It almost feels like pointless to speculate because there are so many possibilities of where things could go. I think for the rest of 2023, we'll just see every organization continue to operate with the schedule that they had in place already. But maybe even that is up in the air. Who the hell knows? I want to pivot for a second to kind of two things here. The first being, obviously we are super critical of Jay Monahan, and I think he's deserved that. I wonder how much he views like his own performance, if you will, in this time, because it's kind of similar. I think you can draw parallels at least to Roger Goodell in the NFL, where how we feel about Goodell as fans, how the players feel about Goodell as players, maybe doesn't really have much of an impact on how he views his own performance, because he kind of serves the owners. So if we as fans are super critical of Monahan right now and the players are super critical of Monahan, maybe he, in his own mind and in others' minds who really matter, maybe he's doing a good job because he's maximizing the amount of money that the tour makes. I don't know. Maybe that's just like a viewpoint that we have to take here. Is he just being incompetent and an asshole? Or is it just that our interests and the players' interests just aren't what he cares about, and he's doing an effective job at the things that he does care about?
I honestly think that he thought the PGA Tour was going to lose all these lawsuits, and he's like, how can I make money from this? And then also maybe become a hero too, because now all my guys are going to get to play for more money. So he saw as a win-win for himself. I think that that's the kind of greed that he works at, because he felt like he could better his name and he could better his pocketbook.
Yeah. And I think where you prove to be like super correct is like every single thing that he said previously about, the ties to 9/11, all of that, it was a strategic thing. It was not what he believed. He was just trying to put the LIV guys in a negative light. And look, like that doesn't change whether or not, the LIV guys made moral or immoral decisions. It just means that Monahan's criticism wasn't genuine. It was completely fraudulent. And that I think is proven to be.
Well, I mean, the deal with Raytheon here was they were going to take over as the sponsor of either the Colonial or the Nelson. And he's like, no, they do business in Saudi Arabia. We're going to turn down that. And then, I mean, I'm pretty sure FedEx delivers in Saudi Arabia. I'm pretty sure they sell Mercedes in Saudi Arabia. Like, what are we really doing here? Like, do I think that that's the best place? Do I agree with everything they do in life? No, but I don't agree with everything they're doing here in America in life right now with kids. So what ground are we going to stand on? I mean,
and it's tough too, because we also like, you can never just go down the rabbit hole of like, is this thing moral? Is that thing moral? There are too many gray areas. And I think that all we can really do is, number one, like recognize how the players are being treated. Cause that's my biggest problem here, right? Is that all of these players, like, Wesley Bryan, let's go back to him. He talked about feeling betrayed this morning. And that's because he's basically taken a stand over the last year plus that he doesn't want to be a part of that. And so he spoke out against it. And for him, unlike Monahan, those words were probably genuine, right? Like he's proven that in his actions by staying with the tour. And then now he's in a position where he has to be affiliated with them in some way or leave golf completely. So he's been put in this like lose-lose situation. That's why he feels betrayed. That's kind of my biggest takeaway.
How do you think he's going to respond? Just curious. What do you think he's going to be? I mean,
I think he's just going to keep playing. Like it would be crazy, I think, to take the moral stand. Like the way I phrased it, I was on Mean Streets earlier with Chris Meany talking about this. And the way I phrased it is like your moral opposition to being affiliated with the Saudi money in any way, shape, or form has to overpower your love of competition and your love of golf. And that's even then before you account for, providing for your family and things of that nature. So I don't think we're going to see drastic things like these guys, boycott the tour anyway and don't play on the PGA Tour anymore. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't feel betrayed. And like they're, I think a lot of people are going to say like, oh, they won't feel betrayed if they're suddenly paid, $10 million just to tee it up next week. It's like those can be separate things. They can feel a little bit better about it because all of a sudden, like they have been given this other incentive to continue to play and things of that nature. But that doesn't change the fact that they have been put into this situation where they're almost being forced into being hypocrites. And I don't think that's fair for a lot of them, because I think that their gripes were very genuine and real, unlike Monahan's.
Yeah, and that's my biggest problem here, right? Is I feel like the players, a lot of the players, especially a guy like Ricky Fowler, who had his back against the wall anyway to regain status and get into majors, like he was genuine. He's like, no, my legacy, this is what I'm going to do. Like, that's the people I feel bad for. Like Rahm and Rory, I don't really feel bad for. They're like, oh, this moral high ground. That's bullshit. They're making so much money, it doesn't matter, right? They got to the point of money where it doesn't matter. And I'm not saying Ricky hasn't got to that point. I have no idea his personal life. But, like, he wasn't into all the majors. He knew he had to go work his ass off to get back. And he has. And he's had a great year, in my opinion, for playing good at a lot of good places and being in the mix. And it's frustrating to hear guys like Monahan talk and think that they're above all of this and they've done something really special for their players. And, yeah, and let's lead into, like, how are these guys at the RBC going to react to this? Like, do I just build a DraftKings team of all Canadians? Because they're going to care because it's Canadian. I mean, they all are there to represent their country.
It is a really interesting question. And I am somebody who, I think anybody who's watching certainly knows this. Like, I typically hate narratives. I just steer away from them. And if narratives are pointing people in a specific direction, I'll say, okay, I'm going against the flow and kind of go against that. This is a week where I think you kind of have to really put some thought into that, because so many of these guys are going to be really distracted. You've got the US Open coming up. If some guys are just going to check out mentally, certainly that would be understandable this week. So yeah,
Fleetwood just walked by the meeting. Fleetwood walked by the meeting and said, just kind of waved and kept walking, didn't even go in. He's like, and he told a reporter, he's like, I got too much of my own game to work on. I'm just going to go get better.
Who said that?
Fleetwood.
Oh, that's great. That's such a Tommy thing too.
Yeah. He's like, I'm just going to go. Like, he didn't even go into the players meeting.
Yeah.
So,
that's awesome.
I mean, it's so weird. I would have, when we decided to not do the show last night and to have the show tonight, like, who would have thought this is where we'd be, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, that was perfect. Thank you. Thank you to all of the US Open guys who decided to play their sectionals and I didn't get in, which meant I stayed late and played in my brother's basketball game and was driving home and couldn't do the show last night. So now we get to do this reaction show. Really good stuff there.
And I mean, we just got to watch a great golf tournament too. Like, I mean, it was an unbelievable golf tournament. We saw guys that were able to go shoot some low numbers and then they would back up. And then, whereas other guys would shoot low numbers different days. Man, can we get more Colonials and Memorials? Like, how do we get more golf tournaments like this? Like, that's the question that we need to answer. I don't want, and this is kind of my biggest fear of the LIV merger is there's so many courses that they play that it takes 20 to 22 under to win. And I just don't like, we just got to see the PGA Tour at its best maybe without a few of the best players, but and then from there, like, is Taylor Gooch now in the U.S. Open? Like,
yeah, I have no clue.
What are we doing here?
It was weird. This is actually kind of funny. I got to the course yesterday morning, woke up at 3:30, by the way, to drive there. Cause I didn't want to drive the day before, cause I might've gotten the call to be in New Jersey instead. Right. So waited until the morning, drive to Woodmont, get there. I'm in the parking lot. I'm walking from my car in the parking lot to the pro shop. And I'm behind a guy who's walking with his caddy. And from behind him, I'm like, I feel like I know who this is, but I can't quite place it. I'm walking the whole way. And finally I get close enough that I can read his, the name on his yardage book or his scorebook in his back pocket. It's Mark Leishman. Like, God, I would not expect Mark Leishman to be at the US Open final qualifier, but hey, that's the golf world we're in now because of LIV.
Yeah, we've talked about all the losers. Let's talk about the winners. Cam Smith, like, winner, obviously. Yeah. Like, there's guys, Phil Mickelson, like, how much of a genius does he look like now?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had a lot.
Yeah, I don't know that Phil looks like a genius. I think he's done so much on social media to kind of hurt his reputation lately that even as everything kind of goes his way here, he still looks like a knucklehead. But I want to. We eventually have to move on from this conversation. But one last thing I want to talk about, because I know there are going to be people who are tuning into this show in large part because they're just confused. They don't understand what's going on in the golf world. They know that they're watching their typical news shows and they're seeing all of this drama on the news that they don't understand. And so maybe they're turning to us to help them understand it. The biggest thing that I want to touch on here is I think the biggest winner of all, sadly, and this is yet another reason to really criticize Monahan, is the Saudis. They are getting exactly what they want here. This whole concept of sport washing is to kind of improve the standing or reputation of a country through the use of sports. LIV was never going to contend with the PGA Tour in terms of the respect that it garnered around the world for its quality of golf, for its prestige, all of that stuff. But now they're actually partnering with the leader of the golf world, the PGA Tour. I can't think of an outcome that would have been better for the Saudis than this.
So I agree to the I think that the Saudis obviously are getting what they wanted ultimately in this deal, but I think that I'm not sure that they really cared. Like, I think they have enough money that they were like, I just want some attention and I want our guys to play and want to do something different. I think the big winners here are the guys that were standing up against the PGA Tour for their hypocrisy and the things that they've done. I think that's who wins here. Now, obviously the Saudis do, but I think that for what we see here, the winners are really the guys that were like, man, we can make all this money. We should be making this money anyway. And the PGA Tour wasn't doing it for us. And these guys were willing to step in and do that. We haven't even talked about Greg Norman. Like, how does he feel right now?
Yeah, true. I think where you and I have a bit of a disagreement, which is great. Like that's what makes, a super fun show, is I don't really care that the LIV guys who were standing up against the PGA Tour turned out to be right that Monahan is a hypocrite. I think we kind of already knew that. And it doesn't change anything for me, like the stance that they took. If I think that if I thought that their decision to join LIV was immoral, this wouldn't change that. This would just make the PGA Tour also immoral, right? Yeah. Now, I don't necessarily have that opinion. Like we were actually discussing this in the Discord chat earlier. I think that somebody like Harold Varner did this the exact correct way. He went to LIV and he said, basically, regardless of where this money comes from, what I'm going to be able to accomplish with this through the Harold Varner Foundation is going to do so much more good in the world than, me agreeing to play in this league, whatever. I think that was perfect. And it's not just honest. It's not just transparent, but there's also a lot of truth to it. Like, he really does do a phenomenal job with his foundation, completely changes lives in his community. All the credit in the world to him. The guys that I had like the biggest gripe with was like Taylor Gooch and Phil Mickelson, guys who are pretending that, number one, like, it's not about the money for them. You went to LIV because of the money, not because you had this like idea to change the world of golf and make it a team game or things of that nature. Like, just be honest, be transparent. And so the fact that, my only disagreement with you is that I don't think any differently of Taylor Gooch now, just because the PGA Tour has also proven to be hypocritical. It's just like it's two wrongs don't make a right.
See, I think so. I'm different with the Mickelson deal because I think he's seen it. He's been around so long, and he's old enough and he's intelligent enough to know. I think this is what Phil Mickelson wanted. I don't think that he cared about the money or anything. I think that Mickelson is getting exactly to a T what he wanted in the whole deal. Like, he wanted to make these people, like, to let the whole world know how big of a hypocrites the PGA Tour are and the things that they do behind the scenes. So I think Gooch is young enough that, like, I'm going to give him a pass because he's a kid, and I think he wanted. He wanted the money, and so, like, I mean, sure, he probably said things that I don't agree with in interviews and stuff. But I think Mickelson, I hate to say this because I'm not a huge Phil Mickelson fan. I think he's a great golfer and one of the greatest I've ever watched. But I think he is getting exactly what he wanted to get when he decided to do it.
It's an interesting take. I don't necessarily disagree. I think it's entirely possible. I struggle to believe it, though, because that seems to require a level of foresight.
But I mean, he was so fed up. How can you he was so fed up?
So I think the way that I would phrase it is like, this is a great outcome for him. But I think that, number one, I think he was probably in some kind of financial trouble and needed the money of LIV. And he just had like a bunch of kind of things conveniently come together where he needed the money. He happened to have gripes with the PGA Tour. And so he could kill two birds with one stone, joining LIV, getting the money, and also then like making the PGA Tour his public enemy number one. And now it's certainly coming together in a way that makes him look dead right about the PGA Tour, which I think like you and I have always agreed that he probably was correct about from the beginning. But that doesn't, again, like change the fact that he's going on Twitter and making a complete ass of himself.
He had an interesting exchange about, and somebody called him out. They're like, oh, something about his gambling problem. And he said, I haven't gambled in years. I'm almost a billionaire. Well, if that's true, which obviously we can't prove that. We have no idea. But if he's almost a billionaire, the 100 million or whatever he got from LIV is 10% of that. Like, it's not, you're not talking about the whole thing. You're talking about enough money. I mean, listen, if I have a 900 million or a billion, it not going to change my life. Right. I mean, that's so if that's all true, which I don't know if it is or not, but that's just what he said. If that's all true, I'm going to take his side in this deal. And I know I'm probably on the minority of that, but I think that he's been involved in the circles of the PGA Tour for so long that he saw the writing on the wall and just kind of had enough.
I think we're probably both right about a lot of this. Like my biggest response to that is I would have a much easier time taking his word on that if he wasn't alternating between saying things like that and, hey, as great as Rory Mcilroy is at golf, I don't think a single LIV team would want him on their squad. Like, of course they would. Yeah. So if he wasn't saying completely ridiculous, absurdly, obviously untrue things in one tweet, I would then have a much easier time taking his word on the next tweet. It's really hard to figure out, I think.
And can you imagine what Rory's thinking right now? With all the stands he's made and the things he's said?
Yeah.
Like, Rahm is probably not that big of a deal because he hasn't really said much about it, right? He hasn't been overly outspoken. He hasn't put his head out there but Rory has to be embarrassed. Has to be.
Yeah, and I think we've seen the toll that this whole thing has taken on his game. Like if at the beginning of the season, we were saying there's a clear and obvious big three, Rory, Scotty, and Rahm. And we maybe were even more along the lines of like, if one of those guys wasn't part of the big three, we probably would have said it was Scotty on the outside looking in.
And Scotty literally doesn't care at all. I guarantee he's like, he has no emotion in this deal. He literally cares.
I think he and Rahm are the same. And like, as long as they can continue to try and win golf tournaments against the best competition in the world, they could not care less about like the circumstances in which they're doing it. They just want to compete in that way. I think we've seen the toll this whole thing has taken on Rory. It'll be very interesting to kind of see if we get more information. Like when he pulled out after the Masters, was that related to this in any way? Or was it just simply, hey, his golf game wasn't in the best spot in large part because mentally he wasn't in the best place with his game and just needed to take a week off, take some pressure off himself and then return. Maybe we'll never know, but it's certainly interesting. I did see
they've known for 7 weeks. 7 weeks is when these talks have been going on for 7 weeks. So I don't know about that, but that's what they're saying.
That makes sense.
I don't take like I said, take it for what it's worth. But
yeah, I saw some discussion earlier today basically saying something along the lines of like, hey, if we find out that Rory knew about this, like there goes his reputation. I think that's completely absurd. Even if he got this like exact news 7 weeks ago and was extremely pissed off about it 7 weeks ago, and then from there, like decided, okay, what's the best way that I can like help them through this thing that I'm very much against, but have no other options to do. Like, doesn't make him a bad guy. He's just put in a lose-lose situation first.
Yeah, I mean, like if I wanted you to make a decision between two colleges, let's say you're a college kid, and I had some kind of authoritative position, I may not tell you what to do, but I would speak in the manner of pushing you one direction. Yeah. And so like that's if we found out Rory knew, I would guess that that's what he was trying to do. It's like, hey, PGA Tour, don't do this. This is how much I'm in. This is how much I care about this. Let's not go down that road. So I actually like of the one person of the whole deal that I think had it right. I think Rory was in it for all the right reasons. I think the big loser here is the PGA Tour and Monahan. Like that's who loses here. I think there's
the court of public opinion.
What's that?
Certainly in the court of public opinion, Monahan's the biggest loser.
Yeah, and I don't know how you change that.
Yeah.
Is there a way to change that? Like what could he do now to change your opinion of him?
I think that number one, there's nothing he could do to change that. But number two, I think he probably doesn't care as long as he's making the PGA Tour a lot of money.
The PGA Tour or himself?
Both.
I think he cares. I don't think he cares about the PGA Tour at all.
Well, I think he cares about the welfare of the PGA Tour just so far as it's his own welfare, right? So if the PGA Tour is making more money, then he is more likely to keep his position at the top of the PGA Tour, which in turn means he makes more money.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to be embarrassed, I would guess. Like, I can't imagine being in that players' meeting and how mad I would be if I turned down hundreds of millions of dollars to be there. Like, there's no way. There's enough alpha males in that room. There's no way that it was pleasant.
Yeah, and you've been kind of saying from the beginning, like eventually there's going to be a merger. I think even you are shocked at how quickly it happened.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, I didn't even know if it was. I didn't know how it would come about. I mean, like, I could speculate on the end game forever, but I don't even know what the end game is here. Yeah. That's the problem. Is we are all stuck in limbo right now. How many guys? What would you do if 50 guys withdrew from Canada? What would you do if 80 guys withdrew from the U.S. Open? Like,
yeah, it's
guys that have status and they're going to be there forever. Like, how many people? What would you like? The outrage that they're just like, we're out.
It's tough because the players would be hurting themselves too if they're ultimately hurting the PGA Tour product, right? So it's.
Do we know though? Like now, it's a LIV product. The head of the whole deal is the LIV guy. Monahan's just a CEO.
Yeah, but so let's say they do that. But where do they go? Where are they playing? Where can they find a substitute for the prestige of winning a U.S. Open?
Well, I mean, but how? It's prestigious right now, but how prestigious is a U.S. Open in 2 years? Do we even know what?
I think that there's a separation of the prestige of winning a golf tournament against the best golfers in the world. Like, I'm not talking about the prestige of, hey, you won this competition that's being, presented by the PGA Tour. Now, obviously, the U.S. Open is the USGA, but that's at least in some way connected to the PGA Tour and the Saudi money. With you just won a major championship of the sport against the best competition in the world, and the prestige comes from the quality of win and the performance on the golf course, and you're able to separate the two. So I think the prestige will still be there in all these golf tournaments.
And I hope you're right. I 100% hope you're right. I'm just saying that if I stood on the moral high ground like Ricky Fowler and said, I'm going to stay here for the prestige, and I've got enough money to live the best life I could imagine living for the next all of my generation and 5 more generations. And then I find out Monahan does this, and I could get 50 other guys in the exact same circle and thinking as I have, and we don't withdraw and we show up Thursday and we just don't show up to our tee time one at a time. Like, that proves a point. So it would have to be one guy. It's not going to take one guy, right? It's going to be a group. I just think, and like I said, I hope it doesn't happen. I don't want to have this discussion in 2 weeks about the nonsense that's gone on. I hope that they all figure it out and we all move on and we make the game of golf better. I just know how I would feel in that situation.
Yeah, I think it would be effective as like a giant middle finger to Monahan, just letting him know how they feel, making his life a little bit more difficult for a week. But it's not going to accomplish anything long term, right? Like, they're going to be back the week after to play the U.S. Open and things of that nature.
We hope. But, I mean, it might be enough for the guy that now's in. I mean, the way that I understood it is the Saudi guy is now in charge. And if they all voice this displeasure with Monahan and they just say, hey, you're out, like, that might be enough for everybody to move on and like say, hey, let's grow this global tour together. I mean, you know what I mean? If that's what they're trying to accomplish. So, like I said, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I think, like I said before about LIV, I think it's going to be a great thing for golf long term. It's just an interesting spot to be. I mean, we're going to talk about this for a long time.
Yeah, and even there, like, whether it's a great thing for golf or not, again, you have to separate. Like, this could dramatically increase the quality of golf, the ingenuity in the way that the tour is structured, things of that nature, with, you know, this obvious dark cloud that's always going to be over them for as long as this partnership exists. So, man, it's going to be super interesting to see how this goes forward. And again, I think we still have a lot more questions than answers.
I got one more point. Do you think that this matters? Is we have NBA finals going on and NHL finals going on as well as the baseball season. Do you think anybody talked about any other sport today besides golf in all of the media?
So that's the thing too, is like, you would think that they would have dropped this on a day where you were getting NBA finals basketball, NHL, Stanley Cup, hockey. They chose a day where there's nothing else. Like, it's just baseball tonight.
We're in the middle of, you know, finals and NHL and stuff. Like, do you think like they're not going to stop talking about this tomorrow or this week or next week? Like, this is going to be the headline story for probably till football season, really.
Yeah, I did see a conspiracy theory too that was like, you know, even as LIV was first forming, like, this was the goal all along from the PGA Tour, that they were going to drop this huge rivalry, like this huge, you know, conflict that draws the attention of national news and things of that nature. And then you get this merger, and again, you dominate headlines and all that. And like, the whole thing was just to create this super tour.
But you wouldn't do that right before the U.S. Open. You wouldn't do that right before the U.S. Open. Like, we've got enough headlines right now going to the U.S. Open. You don't need that. So.
Right.
We don't have very much time left. Let's talk a little bit about this week. Old school golf.
You know, even before we get to Canada, I want to touch a little bit on the Memorial, because, as you said, like, that was a phenomenal tournament. And there were also some performances that I think are really worth discussing. We're going to start with our boy Siwoo Kim, of course, because I think the most interesting thing that we saw from Siwoo this week was he had some rough starts that he battled back from. And what's the thing that we have been most concerned about him throughout the season is, like, when things don't quite go his way, is he mentally there? Does he have the mental strength, discipline, and patience to work through it? Holy cow, did he pass that test this week?
Especially the last round. You're in the final group with Rory, and you get off to, what was he, 3 over through 4, 3 over through 5, like,
yeah,
and then just grind it away. And he had a real chance to win at the end.
Yep. And he did the same thing Saturday. I think he started bogey Saturday and immediately made birdies, like, right away. I mean, that was an awesome performance from him. Exactly what we were looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the grit, and I think he believes right now. Man, I don't know what his number is for the U.S. Open. It's probably too low now, but I was really impressed. Hard golf course, hard test, battled.
Yep.
I'm not surprised by Hovland winning. Makes sense, right? Not a lot of tight lies. Stripes it. Everything worked out. We also have to talk a little bit about Scheffler's performance. 100%. Can you imagine if he starts putting good, what he's going to do to these fields?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this because I think one thing that you and I can speak to maybe more than the average golf fan is there's definitely this like weird psychological effect where it's a lot easier to continue to hit the ball to 4 feet when you're not 10 strokes ahead of everybody, which he would have been if he was making putts. So I think there are two parts to this. Number one is when the putting does rebound, which eventually will happen, can he sustain this ball striking, or are we going to see this weird effect where like when he has the putter, the ball striking isn't quite as dominant? And then the second part, and maybe this is the more important part, is one very clear thing about his ball striking this weekend is because of how poorly he putted and because of how poorly he played Thursday and Friday where he made the cut on the number, is he was playing in the easiest conditions on Saturday. So that helps him shoot a really good score. And then he played in easier conditions, much less of a difference on Sunday, but still played in easier conditions in the winners. So maybe that had something to do with it too.
But did it really get that much easier? I know it got a little bit easier, but it didn't really get
Saturday was enormous. Saturday was like he was probably playing 2.5 strokes of an easier golf course than the leaders.
Well, because he barely made the cut on the number and then moved to the middle. But Sunday was pretty much the same.
Sunday it was probably still a stroke and a half because as close as he was in score to the leaders, there were so many guys bunched together that I think he was still, I don't know, 2.5 hours ahead of the leaders, something like that.
Well, which is probably why you get those bunched up scores, right? If it plays that much earlier for the guys that aren't playing as good, so to speak, for 2 days, they all kind of come together. But I mean, I saw some ridiculous stat on strokes gained tee to green. I mean, 17 something over the last few events. I mean, it's just like, it's obnoxious. It doesn't even make sense.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. And the other thing to it is like, it's not that he's just been unconscious with the irons or something. He's dominating off the tee. He's dominating with his irons. And he's been one of the best in the world around the green. Like we look at long-term numbers for around the green, and if you're gaining a third of a stroke per round, you're going to be in the conversation for the best short game in the world. His last 4 events, he's gained 0.73, 0.92, 0.65, and 1.1 strokes per round around the green. And that's with fewer opportunities around the green because he's hitting so many damn greens. So he's just been unbelievable tee to green.
Yeah, he's so impressive, and we keep waiting for a regression, and there's no regression. Like, at what point do you say, all right, enough's enough? You have to regress. I don't know that he is going to.
Do you think that we see the putter turn around and he wins first, or do we see the struggles with the putter seep into his long game first? Because it looked like the latter was happening this week through 2 rounds, and then he just got unconscious with the ball striking again.
I think we're going to continue to see the same thing for a while. So I think we're going to see him dominate tee to green and struggle with the putter. I wish the Masters was in 2 weeks because I would pretty much bet all I have on him. Because I think that when you get on super undulated, super fast greens, the perfection of putts is not as important as the feel.
Yep, I agree with that completely.
So we'll see. We'll see what really happens, but I don't know.
Some Canada talk now. A difficult kind of situation for me because I rely so heavily on the course fit model, and obviously we have no data on this golf course. So my approach this week is really going to be to look at kind of baseline strokes gained. My biggest DraftKings strategy is going to be to skill set stack. So do I think that driving accuracy is going to be super important here? I don't know. But if it is, I want all of my guys to benefit from that together. Same idea with iron play. You can even break it down. Like I want guys who are really good from 100 to 150 yards. I want really guys who are good with long irons. I want guys who are long off the tee. I want guys who are great around the green or great putters, all of those things. Whatever it is, skill set stacking, I think, is a really, really sharp way to approach DFS this week.
So I actually got to play there. So I caddied for a buddy of mine when he played in the RBC. Shit, it's been a long time. It's 2017 now. But I got to play 9 holes there one day randomly. But I think they're only playing like 3 holes of the 9 I've played. But it's old school, tight. The thing that I'm going to watch is how firm they get the greens, because I think that they want to make this place fairly difficult. I think that Canada treats this tournament as their national open, which it is, right? I mean, this is how they want to represent. And I do know from a couple of people that I've talked to, the rough is way up. So, you've got to take that into effect, which some people think that makes you need to hit it straight. I lean to the guy that hits it a lot further in the air, because you can hit a wedge on the green out of that rough. You can't hit a 6-iron on the green out of that stuff. So it's just a different thinking. I like where your head's at, though. I think that you skill set stack, and I haven't even looked at pricing. I haven't opened DraftKings one time, especially when I found out about the live stuff. It's been I've had a one-track mind. So, I also think a big deal is whose head is in this week. Like, who is here to – I mean, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start my lineup with Corey Connors. He gets his home championship. His head's going to be in it. Should be a good fit for him. He's obviously playing good. And then I'll kind of go from there. There's a couple of other Canadians that I think highly of. Svensson's one, McKenzie's one. I mean, there's some guys that I think that could play good here. That I'm gonna lean to guys that I think that their head's gonna be in the week.
So it sounds like you are saying driving distance may be one of the indicators for you of like most predictive for success this week. Does anything else stand out about your knowledge of this course as something that may pop a little bit more than it usually does in predictive value?
So I'm going to look for also this isn't something, there's no way to really gauge this, but I'm a big believer in guys that understand the game. When you get to golf courses like this, they understand angles. They understand how their ball comes out of the rough. They understand a lot of stuff that maybe gets overlooked as far as golf goes. So I'm going to look to your more intelligent thinkers around the golf course. And what's funny is I don't even know where to start of what I think will win this golf course, because I think if you drive it in a lot of fairways and the greens don't get firm, you could see an 18 under winner. But I think if you get a little bit of wind and you get the greens firm, you could see a 6 under winner, right? So like the way that it all comes together is going to be interesting. And I probably won't build my lineup till tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's how I typically am anyway. A final thought for me, DFS this week, is I think I'm going to embrace the uncertainty of the course. So not only am I skill set stacking, but I'm also going to stack birdie rate over expectation monsters, if you will, because the idea there is like, I don't necessarily know who's going to play well, but one thing I can control is that if I'm right about the guy playing well, he's going to outproduce his real life finishing position on the DraftKings scoring leaderboard. That much we can control. We can do that through the birdie rate over expectation data, which you can find at FTN. I think that'll do it for us this week. A really fun show. So much to talk about. And obviously we will continue to have this conversation in the weeks to come.
Yeah, I don't see it ending here. I'm actually pretty excited. I think that, this show will have a lot to offer here going forward and talking about this stuff. It's going to be really fun. And I haven't got a chance to talk to any of the caddies or players out there yet. But as I get to talk to them, we'll discuss it even more here together.
Yeah, I think that's your homework for the week. Get us some direct quotes from guys for next week.
Yeah, I'll probably be unnamed quotes, but I'll definitely try to see what I can weasel in.
Perfect. All right. Let's have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.